one of the things that Bill Burr did with this, like, I cannot believe his dishonesty about this. That's the thing that really just gets me about it. Is he is like, whoever put this festival together, he keeps saying it that way.
Yeah.
Whoever put this, like it was just some random entrepreneur who just happens to be from there. My guy, it was the culture of ministry.
Yeah.
That's why those clauses are in there. Like this, yes, I mean, would it be different meaningfully if there was somehow some kind of club promoter who put this together inside Arabia? That would be vastly different.
If it was a group of upstart Saudi Arabian comedians or theater promoters who somehow got you into the country, because first of all, that's not easy if the country doesn't want, if the government doesn't want you there, but got you into the country and you did a festival literally for the people, and whatever they paid you because they could afford to pay you that thing, and you did it as an open to the general public, say whatever you want to say, no restrictions. That's a very different thing than doing what he did. And I think the thing about Bill, and first of all, like I say this all the time, people say I'm smart. I'm smart for a comedian. And I think Bill is also
Jeopardy champion.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Celebrity Jeopardy champion, which, as I say, is like being the strongest 2-year-old. He's strong. He's smart for a celebrity. He's strong for a 2-year-old. Yeah. And so I would say that, like, to me, when I want to hear Bill Burr say, I thought I'd go over there and they'd be saying "Death to America," and yet I saw Starbucks and what do you say, Chili's, and I'm like, you have to be smarter than you. I get that comedians often play dumb for the joke, but that's just too much. That's too far. Saudi Arabia and Death to America. You talk about, you pay attention to the news. There's no way you thought that was the case. And for you to say that to defend your presence over there, especially when you're not doing it to be funny, because comedians often play dumb for the joke, as I said, you're actually using this as a way to defend yourself, that because you saw McDonald's, you're like, oh, they're just like us. Like, to me, it just seems like your audience is not going to respect that. Forget what I think or what the New Yorker thinks or what the liberal elite think. Your audience is not going to respect that.
Sorry, give me 1 second. I'll edit this part out.
No problem.
Apologies. The wedge between themselves and the audience, this is an interesting phenomenon. I wonder to what extent you've seen. I mean, surely over the course of your life in stand-up comedy, you've seen various splits between audience and performer, and certainly you see it in music when Metallica cuts their hair, or Opeth does sing-song death metal, right? You get these revulsions, but it's when, like, it's very obvious to understand, right? It's when the audience whatever identity you cultivated, like you remain to a degree frozen in time, and that actually can be bad when you change in a healthy direction. And they also can't follow you there. But it seems like that's not what has happened. You have Burr on tape. Granted, there are some differences where he's criticizing, I think, Beyonce or maybe Christina Aguilera. I can't remember who.
Well, he's criticized billionaires regularly for being on. He just went through a whole. That's the thing with Burr. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay.
But Burr just went through a whole media cycle. The same time Maron did, when Maron did the Theo Von joke in his special, and Maron sort of went through a whole promo cycle of ethering the Rogan Sphere. And Burr at the same time was on Vulture's Good One podcast, and he talked about the unethical nature of billionaires, which is effectively like how people with a lot of money, if you're not supporting the people beneath you, then that's not fair. You shouldn't be a billionaire. To then, like, just a few weeks later, to be in Saudi Arabia taking, forget billionaires, they're probably trillionaires, money to do a festival and to play by the rich people's rules, and to not see why your fans would go, wait, but you just said that.
Right. And again, part of why Saudi Arabia is engaging in these tourism kind of related events is partly to change their economy, but partly also so that they can quell civil unrest, because people now have a degree of entertainment options. Like, the Saudis are explicit about this. It's not even a thing that they necessarily hide. It's all part of it, which is why, if I may, one more thing about this, I'd love for you to weigh in on. When Burr gets out there and is like, well, actually, if you consider what we are, he literally tries to paint himself as like, no, I'm actually the pro free speech guy, because I went over there and did my act in a way that opens the economy. And I'm like, dude, they tried this with, like, what they claimed was going to happen to the Chinese market 20 years ago, about how we got to allow in, various forms of free market reforms because it's going to westernize China. It did no such thing at all. It's obviously just self-aggrandizing bullshit. But it is a weird thing to go to and say, no, it's like, no, you're the real racist. You know those people?
Yeah, exactly. You're the real racist.
It's in reverse though. Like we're the real free speech advocates. It's
That's
bizarre.
And I think the thing that he's dealing with right now is his audience is like, we remember who you are though, because again, just a few weeks ago you said the opposite. So I think it's, and this is also about and Burr's not in the Rogan sphere. I want to be clear about that. But there's a type of comic right now who a lot of them are in the Rogan sphere, who their hypocrisy is becoming so clear, and also their buyer's remorse for endorsing Trump is becoming so clear that their audience is actually kind of sick of them. And I think a lot of those comics who went over there who are the Rogan sphere comedians, their audiences are like, man, can't you just go back to smoking weed and talking about conspiracy? We're not interested in this version of you. And I think for a lot of those comics, if they just said to their audience, man, that money was good and I took it and I don't give a shit about the politics, their audience would be like, thank you, because we don't actually care that much either. But when you try to come back with these sort of excuses of like, now I'm a cultural envoy, and it's like, you ain't never been a cultural envoy. Like you've never been that person. Why would you expect me to believe that now? Especially when we can tell this is the argument you created on the plane ride back. You didn't make this announcement when you got the festival. I'm doing it to be a cultural envoy. You just took the bag, the flyer went up, you got in trouble, you did it, and on the plane ride back, you're like, how do I figure out how to make this make sense so I can retain my audience?
I want to use this conversation, like what has happened with this festival, to have like a broader conversation about the state of comedy, particularly stand-up comedy. Mm-hmm. If I may, and you kind of indicated there was a relationship to it, so we should kind of get into it, which is podcasting. This is my personal opinion, okay? There are going to be exceptions to what I'm about to say. There are, I'm sure somebody can find something that would be like, well, no, in this particular case, that's not true. And I grant, I'm painting a bit of a broad brush here. I can't think of anything that has made me dislike stand-up comedy more in the last 5 years than podcasting. It has destroyed it for me. And on two levels. Yeah. One, again, we were talking before off camera that I've been watching a bunch of Bill Hicks interviews, and there's one from 1988 or 89, and he's in Memphis at, Mr. Laugh-A-Lots or something like that. Mm-hmm. And he's talking about I don't like being on the road, but because I'm on the road, I get to do my act every night, and it just really sharpens it and it makes it better. Mm-hmm. So podcasting, to a degree, the success of them, because of the fame that it builds, it's an independent revenue stream. So I think touring isn't as important potentially as it was back in that day. But the second one is just a personal one, which is, again, there are plenty of exceptions, present company included, but there are just and you don't have a podcast that you're doing all the time in that sense, but like the ones who do, it has revealed them to be deeply incurious fucking idiots.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't need this part of your thought process.
I don't need this
just give me, because I'm not saying that their final stuff isn't like, oh, it's in all ways bad. That's really not my point. Yeah. It's that I don't need the rough draft.
No.
What has podcasting in your mind done to the business?
I mean, I think so. Yeah, you're right. It's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, not every comedian wants or has the ability to. There used to be the stand-up comedian thing of like, I'm a stand-up comedian. I do the Young Comedian Fest thing on HBO. I do an HBO half hour. I do an HBO hour. I get a sitcom. I'm in a couple movies. I get a book deal. There was sort of maybe I'm on SNL. Maybe I become like sort of big enough where I'm just sort of like an actor in movies occasionally, or maybe I get out of that and I just become fully an actor. But there was sort of like a path, but that path isn't big enough for everybody, and it doesn't fit for everybody. So podcasting, in a great way, has given people the ability to create their own income stream and actually find their audience and go direct to their audience. That part of it is good. So I don't need everybody. I just need the people who really get what I'm doing. And I don't have to rely on Hollywood. I don't have to rely on auditions and also sitcoms. There's no sitcom really anymore. And the media landscape has changed dramatically. So which is great. And I give Rogan ultimately the credit for showing comics that path, because he's been doing his show since before we even called it podcasting. It was just live streaming. You know what I mean? That's the thing that when we write the book on this, that's the thing that Rogan did do that we go, that's a good thing. And then Marin comes in and shows that a podcast can be a way to get to know a comedian in a different way. So that the audience who sees Maron is like, he's just a bitter comic on stage. He goes, oh no, he's a hurt human being. You know what I mean? So like we get a deeper relationship with this person. Or you go, I really don't even like this version, which Maron's fine with. I think the issue was when comics started to see, oh, that's a way to make money. I think, and this is true of capitalism just generally, as soon as you go into it as a way, I can make more money here or I can supplement my income. Now you're playing to the audience instead of playing for the, you know what I mean? Like you're actually like, the person you're being on the podcast is like a character who you think the audience will like. And then the audience gives you feedback on that. And so it becomes this feedback loop that isn't actually as creative as the act of standing on stage and doing jokes. You know what I'm saying? You're actually sort of like you're allowing the audience to curate you instead of you curating them. And so somehow that's how Theo Von, who has no business ever being in a political conversation with anybody, but gets caught up in this Rogan sphere, suddenly goes, of course I should talk to Donald Trump. Of course I should talk to J.D. Vance. I can't even say his name. Of course I should talk to these people. When it's like, you have no business. Your act is not even in any way slightly, and I mean this in a sort of an academic way, intelligent or concerned about the news of the day. Like, why would you do that? But because he's suddenly a part of this Rogan sphere and they're all sort of like creating their own sort of separate ecosystem, he gets offered to talk to these people and has nothing to say to them. And even Rogan, I mean, I think more than the Trump interview, the best example of who Rogan is for years he talked about how The Rock was on steroids and how it was clear he was on steroids and how why doesn't The Rock just admit he's on steroids? And then he had The Rock sitting across from him in his studio, and that never came up. Not even in a joking way, not even in a like, come on, man, you know, that like these people, he's more interested in his relationship with this giant movie star than he is in being the guy that the audience actually knows him to be. And so I think that, and then you spend more time caring about your podcast. And a lot of these comedians, Theo Von's a great example. Nobody knew him as a stand-up comedian generally. He was a stand-up comedian, but he wasn't a guy who people were like, that's my favorite comic widely. And so then it's like people then go see the stand-up comedy act, and it's like, I think I like him better on the podcast. You know what I mean? Like the act is not even doing, the podcast is supposed to be the loss leader for the act. And now the act is just sort of the loss leader for the podcast.